This is the McGraw-Hill, it was 2010, on how these new state assessments, you'll see psychometric issues. The seminar went on to define psychometrics as the measurement of psychological variables, like intelligence, achievement, aptitude, and personality traits. And both the Smarter Balanced and the PARC implement those processes. In the PARC in Maryland in 2013, they had another conference in how to put this stuff all together. And what they said was, we need to determine if the children are college and career ready. We need to assess the full range. Remember that social and emotional learning where they said there's a bigger range? We need to assess the full range. We need to assess the full range of performance, and then we need to come up with all the data to make this happen. And again, they're talking about measuring the full range. And then they said, this is how we do it. We begin with the claims we want to make about the students. Then we gather evidence to support our claims. We design the tasks to create the evidence to support our claims. This isn't how much do you know. This is, we decide what this test is going to say. And then we create the test to give us the result that we wanted. This is from the Washington Post, talking about the PARC test not being valid or reliable and how they're basically experimenting on children. Here in New York, your own educators, one of your, she was a former principal, she was a teacher of the year, actually built an anonymous blog so teachers could go online and put some of the questions from the PARC. And teachers talked about what happened. 23 students opted out of this classroom. 3 times were in tears. Children saying, I thought I was smart, I guess not. I'm stupid, I can't even take a test. One little girl carved the words, I'm stupid, into her own wrist. Why? Well, this is the 6th grade test, and here's one of the selections that the 11-year-olds were supposed to read. As a result, the location of the cloud is an important aspect as it is the setting for the part of the artwork. In his favorite piece, Nimbus d'Aspremont, the architecture of the d'Aspremont-Linden Castle in Rechem, Belgium, plays a significant role in the feel of the picture. The contrast between the original castle and its former use as a military hospital and mental institution is still visible. You could say the spaces function as a plinth for the work. Do you know what a plinth is? How many 11-year-olds do you think know what a plinth is? 8th grade. This is probably one of my very favorite ones. This is 13-year-olds about, they had to read about some amusement parks. Paradoxically, we posit that our fear of children being harmed by mostly harmless injuries may result in more fearful children and increased levels of psychopathology. And they're 13. But if you wanted the scores to be low, to prove the Common Core was more rigorous, you can adjust the cut score, or you can adjust the content of the test. Charlene Williams is a psychologist at UCLA who talked about these tests. She said there's no validity. She said the cut scores are arbitrary. She said the computer adaptive tests mean you don't know what test your child took, so the score can be raised or lowered arbitrarily. You would never know. She said there's people are rating these tests as all subjective ratings. How do you know if your rater is loosey-goosey or Mary Martinet? You don't have any way of knowing how your child's test was rated. And finally, PARC and Smarter Balanced say these tests are copyrighted so nobody can see them, which means there's no way to validate them because they won't let anybody else look at them. That's the basic rule is I let somebody else see my work so they can check it. Can you imagine a cancer doctor saying, I found a cure for cancer, I'm not telling you. You just have to buy my product. Well, what's in it? I can't tell you. It's copyrighted, it's secret. These are secret tests. Here in New York, you've had many people complain about what's happening in education and with the Common Core. This is a statement from over 500 early childhood professionals. It was written while the core standards were being written, saying they have grave concerns about the standards because they'll lead to long hours of instruction in kindergarten. They're inappropriate standardized testing. This testing will crowd out the things that kindergartners need to do. Here in New York, there was actually an article about how in one kindergarten they canceled the little kindergarten show because they didn't have time because the 5-year-olds had to be college and career ready, which should be funny, except it actually happened. They said there's no evidence that these standards work. There is absolutely no evidence anywhere that if you learn to read at 6 as opposed to 7, you're going to do better in life. That's why the mandatory school age used to be 8, especially for little boys, because it took them longer to be able to sit in a chair. It was signed by over 500 professionals. And just so you can see, there's all the signers. 3 of them were the past presidents of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, the foremost authority in early childhood education in America. Now, contrast that list with the 29 people who wrote the Common Core standards, not one of whom was a classroom teacher. Here in New York, Mary Calamia, who was a licensed clinical social worker, actually testified and talked about how she was all of a sudden getting these calls from children who were self-mutilating. They were burning themselves and hurting themselves because of all the stress of these inappropriate standards. Children saying they wouldn't go to school, they were stupid, school was too hard, and the tests were so high stakes that the kids couldn't cope. She said they're not wired for what Common Core calls for at the early grades. Yet we're measuring children against inappropriate standards and then saying the children are delayed, the children are fine, the standards are wrong. One of the things she talked about is this whole asking little ones to persuade. In order for me to persuade you of something, I have to actually have some understanding of your point of view. But a child under the age of 8 can't do that. A child under the age of 8, if I had corn, everybody on the planet has corn. Like, my universe is the only universe. So the only way I can persuade you is to try to scare you, which taps into the limbic system, which is where you don't want little ones to go, which is why we're having so much additional violent behavior in the earliest grades. When the math standards were written, math teachers hated them. William McCallum, who wrote the standards, told them, don't worry about the standards because they wouldn't be too high. So you don't need to worry about the math standards because they won't be too high. The Park actually has a sample curriculum. They say by grade 4, the kids have to be able to do add and subtract using the standard algorithm. That means write it down one number under another, borrow or carry correctly. That used to be a grade 2 math standard. Now they don't have to be able to do it till grade 4, and they don't have to be able to do long division until grade 6. Except starting in, say, grade 6, they can use a calculator when they take the test, so they never have to learn to do it at all. Trevor Packer, who's the senior vice president of the College Board, told the American Association of School Superintendents that Common Core slows math down. It never gets to calculus. Calculus is outside the math progression by about 2 years. Common Core slows math down. The National Center for Education and the Economy, which is a federal think tank, talks about what does it mean to be college and work ready, and they say being ready to go to a community college. And that means Algebra 1 by